I think I can speak for everybody when I say that I was dumbfounded when Kron Gracie versus Bryce Mitchell got added to UFC 310. But it seemed to me like most people's reaction was something along the lines of, Kron Gracie does not deserve a ranked fight, is something that I heard a lot of people say. And I agree with that sentiment, but in a slightly different way. In my mind, it was like, Kron is going to get fucking murdered by Bryce Mitchell. Like, Cron is going to get decimated. And I just don't understand what they're doing here. I do not get it. I mean, Bryce Mitchell had the occasional moment against Ilia Topuria. I mean, yes, that fight did not go well for him, but, I mean, he was in there. He stood in front of Ilia. He ate some shots. He had some moments of really good head movement. He had moments of actually landing some decent shots. Even took him down at one point. And now you're giving him Kron Gracie, a guy that approaches mixed martial arts fights like a fucking house cat who lays on his back and just kind of smacks at you? I mean, what are we doing? I do not understand the logic here, and honestly, part of me legitimately does feel bad for Kron a little bit, okay? And not because I have a feeling that this fight is going to be akin to when Vegeta tried to fight Final Form Frieza, and he started fucking crying, okay? Like, that is really, really sad, but when you look at Kron Gracie and you look at his upbringing, that is where I personally start feeling bad for him. I mean, honestly, because, look, Kron Gracie, for those who don't know, obviously comes from the legendary Gracie family. His dad is Rickson Gracie, somebody who gets Joe Rogan as hard as a fucking rock the second you mention his name. I mean, look, Rickson Gracie's a legend, and Rickson Gracie is famous, and he has gone on record to say, all you need to win in MMA is Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. That's what he truly believed. And, of course, he has a son. This son has been raised and brought up through this philosophy. It's pretty much the burden is 100% on Kron's shoulders to carry on his family's name and do what his family did, which is win in MMA only using Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And it's like, the deck was kind of stacked against this poor guy from the start. And what honestly makes it even sadder to me is that, look, even if Kron was aware of this, even if Kron, truly in his heart of heart understood that, look, there's no way you can be elite in MMA only using one fucking skill. I mean, he's tough out of luck because when you look at Kron Gracie's jiu-jitsu career, which, I mean, he legitimately was extremely accomplished there. He was an ADCC champion. He won a black belt IBJJF championship. But even then, he only used old school Gracie techniques. He would not use any new school shit. And, he really did in those basic fundamental areas. I mean, he was amazing. But that is really all he stuck to. Arm bars, rear naked chokes, guillotines. And look, his rear naked choke was absolutely nasty. His guillotine was insane. But, he, throughout his entire life, has only worked to master those old school fundamental Gracie techniques to the point that Kron Gracie doesn't know how to wrestle. Like, he doesn't. You look at any of his jiu-jitsu matches, it pretty much is just him kind of fucking walking at you, trying to clinch up. All right, that's all he's got. He doesn't have any wrestling at all. And it's like, dude, at this day and age, if you are a jiu-jitsu specialist who doesn't have any takedowns, it's like, what are you fucking doing? Like, what? And again, it just gets sad. When you look at the one double leg attempt he had against Cub Swanson, it's just like, oh, yeah, no, that's not good. That's not good. And Kron has been training his entire life, but he is unfortunately been born into a family that just can't move on with the times because, again, he just doesn't. He's helpless here. He's helpless here. It's like, what? Okay, so now you're going to start drilling takedowns. All right, you spent your whole life focused on these very specific techniques, and now that you're fucking 36 years old, now we'll start drilling some fucking double legs. Now we'll start drilling some leg locks. Now we'll start drilling something that you might actually be able to use in an MMA fight other than just pulling guard, guillotines, and rear naked chokes. Again, he is tough out of luck in this area. And, it's kind of a shame because at a certain point, he actually did seem to have somewhat a wee bit of potential in MMA. I mean, you look at his first ever fight in the UFC against Alex Caceres. Essentially, he just waited for Caceres to overextend on the right hand, ducked right underneath it, took his back from the clinch, actually had a very decent back take. And of course, from that area, right, Kron Gracie is so fucking nasty. If he's on your back, you are in serious trouble. But then we get to the Cub-Swanson fight, and I'll be honest, from my recollection, I had recalled that fight being pretty terrible. I recalled Kron Gracie just getting the shit kicked out of him all 3 rounds. Because, look, he took a 4-year layoff after that fight, which in my mind was because, he had disgraced his ancestors, and instead of committing, Japanese ritualistic suicide, he just decided to, take a leave of exit. But actually, upon going back and rewatching it, it was a pretty good fight, to be fair. Kron Gracie the entire time just was hands up, marching forward constantly, and actually throwing a lot of punches. And Cub-Swanson, for the most part, was just on his bike, moving, landing shots, and he was beating up Kron really badly. Don't get me wrong, but constantly being on your bike like that is exhausting. And there were certain moments where Cub was actually slowing down. Kron began landing on him, even cut Cub pretty decently. But here's the thing. The old school Gracie style is built for no time limit. Because the fact of the matter is, it can be really difficult to submit your opponent when they just kind of shell up and or disengage the entire time. It takes a lot of time to set up submissions against somebody. But it's the rounds. That's what it comes down to. In MMA, there are rounds that break up the fight, and because of that, you have to constantly be resetting, and you only have a certain amount of time to work, and that completely neuters that Gracie style. But even then, like I said, at least Kron put up a fight. At least Kron fucking went after it. But then you look at the Charles Jourdain fight, he didn't throw a single punch. The only strike Kron attempted against Charles Jourdain was a zesty little kick off of his ass. That was the one strike he tried to throw. Other than that, it was 100% pulling guard and butt scooting at you. That is all he did. And Kron Gracie came out and said, I got some really bad advice. I tried to please the jiu-jitsu community, and I will change this time outwards. And it's like, you know what? Okay. I like the sound of that. All right. Okay. And, maybe if Kron did get a really lower ranked, maybe a really old, washed fucking, I don't know, but just fucking somebody. All right. Just some can that he might be able to go in there and have a decent fight with. That would be great. But they're giving him fucking Bryce Mitchell. And look, put a gun to my head and make me say something optimistic in the favor of Kron. Okay, Bryce Mitchell's A game is, of course, wrestling. It, of course, is grappling. But you really, really got to be careful shooting on Kron. His guillotine legitimately is one of his best submissions. I would say he has a Charles Oliveira-esque guillotine. I know we haven't seen it in MMA, but again, remember, there's a gun to the back of my head right now, and I have to say this. But even then, it's like Bryce Mitchell, he somewhat stood in front of fucking Ilia Topuria and striked with him. All right, yeah, obviously the fight didn't go well for him, but he was in there with him, you know what I mean? And now you're putting him against Kron Gracie. What are we doing here? And I just, for the life of me, I am so fucking curious what Kron's game plan is going to be. Like, what is he trying to accomplish here? Like, how in the world could he end up getting into a position where he wins this fight? I just don't know. Bryce Mitchell is 1,000 times better of a wrestler than he is. Of course, just in straight up grappling, you'd give the edge to Kron. But even then, how can Kron ever end up in a dominant position on the ground? I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible. I don't know. I'm so baffled by the decision here. And look, of course, there's a lot of controversy because this fight moved Mosvar versus Aljo off of the main card and onto the prelims, which of course I think is nonsense, right? That should not have happened. But even then, right, it's like, okay, well, I don't mind. I guess Bryce deserves to be on the main card too. I guess, all right, if we're just throwing shit around. But why the hell is Dong Hoo Choi fighting Colby Covington's old punching bag on the main card instead of Mosvar Aljo? Why not just have Mosvar Mosvar Aljo open up the main card and then throw them to the prelims, right? Like, what? I don't understand. At every single turn of this whole debacle, I am just left more and more and more confused. I mean, I would love for someone to explain the logic and reasoning here. Why does Choi Dong-ho have to be ahead of Mosvar Aljo? I mean, why are they even ahead of Anthony Smith versus Dominic Reyes? I mean, none of this makes any sense. At every single turn, I am left scratching my head more and more and more. I don't know. I'm so flabbergasted here. I don't fucking know. I don't know, but again, at the end of the day, man, I just feel a little bit bad for Cron.